Tam, how effed are we?
I mean, we're fucked enough to where we don't have to say effed. Like, we are truly fucked. But now you're gonna have to get a little bit more narrow the aperture in terms of the question. What are you referencing in particular?
Let's get into
Yeah.
it. Welcome to Coach's Corner, where culture, real talk, and strategy collides. I'm Nia.
And I'm Tamer. We're breaking down the week's biggest plays, we're connecting the dots, and we're keeping it real.
No topic's too big, and we're sugarcoating nothing.
Because knowing the game ain't enough. You got to know how to win it.
Let's get into it.
Let's go.
Let's get to know your host this week. What is a cultural moment that made you Tam?
What an interesting question. A cultural moment that made me me. I don't know if it's a cultural moment or not, but I remember the first, I was 14 and I remember listening to It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And talk about just Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos. And, she watched Channel Zero and all these different tracks on that made me kind of read into who are Nessie and Prosser, I learned a lot about Nelson Mandela. I'm 14, you know what I mean? And I had to do my own research. And by the way, this is before, I'm going to age myself before the internet. So for me, music opens up people an awful lot and tells a lot about people. People define and relate to one another through music. And for me, 35 years ago or whatever it was, listening to Chuck D talk about stuff which I chose to educate myself further about really kind of moved me. So the entire anti-apartheid movement, pride in blackness, pride in Muslim heritage, all that kind of stuff, pride in African heritage, all that really shaped me.
Tam, you've always been a deep brother, huh? Even from 14.
Too serious.
you
I
just
don't know.
kinda
Deep is a complimentary way of putting it. I take things a little bit too seriously sometimes. So either way.
No, deep is a high compliment when it's coming from sisters. Deep
Well,
is
I'll
good.
take it as such. Thank you.
So for me, it was the movie Low Down Dirty Shame.
Really? Okay.
Have you seen Low Down Dirty Shame?
I've seen parts of it. Yeah. So just so you know, Do the Right Thing was my version of, if you're talking about a film moment, Do the Right Thing did that for me as well. So as you said, I gravitate towards heavier content, I suppose.
Yes. And I think I'm in a mix, right? Low Down Dirty Shame is hilarious, but it just felt super empowering to me because it was comedic, but it was action. And it was from Keenan, and I just, and
Yeah, I remember it
Jada
was the
was,
Wayans brothers, right?
yeah, it just did it for me. It did it for me. So, and that's still my favorite movie. Shame. I love that movie. Which artist is most clutch in your playlist right now?
I mean, Kendrick is there, but just to be honest with you, that's not exactly my generation. So if I feel like I'm going to get into like a mood, I'm very mood oriented. So it just depends on, I'm a neo soul early 90s type. So D'Angelo
Yeah.
was always there. Angie Stone, who just recently passed away, and a Richmond native. But yeah, I mean, kind of the neo soul list kind of puts me in a certain space, but just depends on the mood.
You barking up my tree because Erica definitely is the most clutch artist for me. It doesn't matter what season I'm in, I can always kind of pull from Erica. I love that. Jordan or LeBron?
Jordan, I mean, that's not even a debate. Come on.
Seriously,
Not
it's
even
not.
close.
I'm a
Not even
90s
close.
baby.
I mean, with all respect to
I'm a
LeBron
90s
James,
baby.
there's just no one's come close to the long-term influence over everything. I mean, Jordan is it's a lifestyle almost. It's a brand that is, think about it this way. He's selling more shoes on a daily basis today than he did when he was playing. And he's been out of the game for 2 decades or something.
Facts are the facts. We do love King Bron though.
Are you kidding me? Like,
is.
in terms of gravitating towards like substantive shit, like I love what LeBron James has done with his school and how comprehensive he is about it, like bikes for kids and a pantry and a refrigerator and all that kind of stuff. Everything that he's doing is like the impact he's having in terms of improving people's lives and like Black quality of life. 2 completely different debates.
Tam, what's your everyday superpower?
Everyday. Why are you doing this to me? I feel like
Last one.
I saw an interview where Mos Def was asked his opinion on Drake, and that was the exact quote he used. Like, why are you doing this to me? My everyday superpower, I think, is figuring out, like, defining things into terms that actually matter. Like, you hear of a concept or calling people on the bullshit. Like, what are you actually saying? Why does any of that matter? What's the answer to the question? So what? So I think that might be it. I don't know. It's a tough question to answer, though. How about yours? What's your super?
It's very similar to yours, right? I have a very complicated life. I always have been ever since I was a little girl. My life been complicated, but
No,
I
you're gonna have
know
to say
how to
more than
make a
that. Everybody's life has complexities. Like,
actually ready to tell my
well, tell your
story.
story.
I'm
Let's
ready.
hear it.
No, okay. So listen, I was the little girl, teenage mother, didn't live in the same house with my dad, lived in a house full of people with my grandmother, that type of thing. And I'm the middle child. So I'm lucky. I have an older sister who probably has way more going on than me. So and then I was diagnosed with severe eczema, and then it turned into anxiety, and then it kind of spiraled. It's been a complicated life, but I've always figured out how to make it simple and fun, regardless of my circumstances. And yeah, that's me. That's my superpower.
That's all right.
It is pretty cool. All right, we're gonna go to the next segment, Town.
Following you.
Hot takes and timeouts. LeBron versus Stephen A.
Look, Stephen A is a talking head. LeBron is a legend. I don't know why he engaged with him. Stephen A knows how to get attention. And LeBron needs to take the fact that his son is a grown man in the NBA. He should be able to, sort of stand up for himself. I get the whole father-son thing, but this was stupid from start to finish.
Interesting. All right, where them fans at? Tim, do you know that line dance?
Yeah, what's the next?
It's all over the
So
internet
let's
right
just go to the next question. I have no clue what you're talking about.
But Tim, is it okay that we are in the streets dancing instead of
It
marching?
wasn't okay. Like, finding joy in these dark times goes back to the beginning of, the African diaspora being introduced to the American soil. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a good time. If you're not having a good time, you're probably doing it wrong. That's not my issue. My issue is the last line dance I did was the electric slide. I have no idea where them fans at even means. So
Okay, we ordering Tam a fan. The Tesla vandalism, is that smart? Do you get it? Or we ain't building power like that?
no, it's not smart. I'll quote Chris Rock. I wouldn't do it, but I understand. But at the same time, like, you're giving them a reason to sort of point the finger at you for being illogical, irrational, violent, et cetera, et cetera. That said, uh, watching Elon cry and bitch and moan doesn't bother me in the least.
Jasmine Crockett versus Greg Abbott. Is Hot Wheels too much?
Look, I mean, I'm going to say the guardrails, the wheels fell off this thing a long time ago. And if you're going to be butthurt by one nickname, stop using nicknames everywhere else. Like, I'm just not going to buy it. I'm not, you talk about delicate flowers and everything else when referring to the liberal lefts and the far left, and then you go sit here and cry over that. Buck up. You're a big man. You know how to fight back.
There is a space for conversation around ableism, but this ain't it right
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Like, I literally have never and will never, and my kids would never make fun of somebody because of a disability. It's just not it, right? It's just not the move. But when you are literally, I'll just say it this way: the rules have gone out the window in terms of political discourse. There are no, I don't know, swing back.
There are no boundaries.
Yeah, swing back.
There is no out of bounds.
He's been on the offensive, taking women's rights and everything out. Look, I'm not getting into a political conversation here, but if that's going to get you all up in arms, I will say this for Jasmine. You gave them another reason, just like the Tesla bombers. You gave them a reason to come at you. You've distracted from whatever your main point is, but you know what? All's fair.
Tam, how effed are we?
I mean, we're fucked enough to where we don't have to say effed. Like, we are truly fucked. But now you're going to have to get a little bit more, narrow the aperture in terms of the question. What are you referencing in particular?
Let's get into it. Okay. The people want to know, are the price of eggs, the price of cars, the Department of Education, like, are we going to be able to afford a bottle of champagne at this point? Like, break it all down.
I love that that's where you start with. Champagne is the key indicator of whether or not quality of life is going up or down.
I'm concerned.
Well, I don't even know if that's the right question, to be honest. If we're talking about like the way the American citizenry is responding to whatever from a quality of life and geopolitical and sociological sort of examination, I think there are red herrings out there. The price of eggs was one of them. Because if that was truly the motivator behind why people behaved a certain way, and we talk about it in an electoral context, they would be clamoring for results right now. And the price of eggs, as far as I can tell, hasn't changed an iota. And the promises that were made by people that were aspiring to high office were that on day one, every person that's running for president says that kind of thing. And if that truly was the motivator, we're on now day 72 or whatever of this new administration, and the price of eggs hasn't moved. So is it really the price of eggs? I don't think it ever was. The concept of it's the economy stupid is one that, came from the, early 80s, circa Ronald Reagan. And that may have been the case then. And the reason I think it was the case then, and this is going to be a thing you're going to hear from me over and over again, is because back then, back in the 80s, with the exception, of course, of Jesse Jackson, who never really had a chance of ascending to the Oval Office, it was always going to be white men. Like that was the standard. So the idea of racial animus and playing to that discomfort of the American public in terms of who may be leading us wasn't really on the table. So it was the economy stupid, and people were actually worried about, sort of tangible policy positions, et cetera. Now, when you start introducing or making race front and center of everything, when you start having black candidates, when the browning of America is occurring, and when there is more insecurity among working class white folks, you can start introducing subliminal or overt messages about where they stand in the hierarchy. White folks have always occupied a position of power in this country, and the quality of life in general doesn't match what they feel it should be. And they start pointing to things like eggs when it's not eggs. So is it, I mean, we're getting into a pretty deep conversation here, and this is kind of where I go with things all the time. And I may be boring you and anybody else who might listen to this to tears, but the point I'm making is, it never was eggs. It was never about eggs. The joke in my house, and my kids will tell you this, the answer to every single question is racism. And a lot of people are going to be turned off by that, but you can kind of trace so much of this back to that. You can trace just about every issue back to that, and insecurity. So there's a reason, for example, I'll jump topics here. There's a reason when you look at the Hispanic community, and surveys have been done at UCLA and Berkeley, et cetera, that show that, upwards of 30% of Hispanic Americans, regardless of country of origin, whatever it may be, upwards of 30% do not identify as of color. They identify as white. And a lot of them darker than you and me.
Right.
But it's this proximity and race towards whiteness as the ideal that kind of dictates so much of the way people behave and act out and what it is that they're seeking. And in particular, in immigrant communities, seeking that American ideal is a picture of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white person eating apple pie with a white picket fence in a suburb.
We talked about the economy. We talked about everything ties back to racism. What's happening with the Department of Education, the threat to shut that thing down, all of the federal employees being laid off? How would you tie that back to racism?
So go right back to, so that's an easy connection for me. Like, again, think about how long people have been scapegoating this idea of affirmative action, right? How long has that battle been ongoing? And I tell people all the time, if it's a matter of labeling, let's remove the label affirmative action from it. And let's just call it, just for the sake of debate, let's remove affirmative action. Let's call affirmative action Uncle John. All right. It's no longer called affirmative action. It's called Uncle John. All right. So if little Jimmy, 14th generation white boy from Central Virginia, goes to college, comes out of college, and he's looking for a job, and Uncle John is there, and Uncle John can take his resume and pluck it from a list, from a stack of 1,000 of them. And Uncle John, who's a VP at that company or owns the company, for God's sake, can go to HR or whomever and say, hey, really want you to put my nephew Jimmy into this job. Nephew Jimmy gets that job a lot. That happens all over the place. There's a term for it now, Nepo babies, whatever. Like, but that's been happening since the beginning of time in this country. It happens everywhere. And it's not a crime, by the way, right? Once Jimmy is there, let's remove the concept of failing upwards and all the things about mediocrity and everything. If Jimmy does really well and earns promotions and everything else, so be it. Good for Jimmy. If Jimmy screws up and ends up getting fired, then so sorry, Jimmy. But that's what you've proven your competence, or you've proven your incompetence. That's Uncle John. Black folks don't have most of the time black folks, Hispanic people, non-white folks in America don't traditionally, by the numbers, population wise, don't have those Uncle Johns in all those places. And we can talk about why, and that's a deeper thing. Never mind that. But right now, I don't have an Uncle John anywhere, and I never did. That's why organizations and associations, fraternities, sororities are so important, because that's the network we're able to try and build sort of chosen family, because we don't necessarily have the Uncle John. So being an affirmative action hire is just like your Uncle John pulling your resume from the middle of the pack up to the top. So I don't have a problem with any of that. So the point of all of that, this is a long answer to a relatively short question, is the the undoing of the Department of Education is tied to a lot of those same concepts, because what was seen, especially in higher education, was affirmative action was taking all these, non-white people are taking all these white people's places at all these colleges. Well, that's never been true, by the way. And nepotism could not be more alive and thriving than if you go to the high-flying Ivy League schools where X percent, a disproportionate percent of people are either wealthy or, or legacy students. So this idea that a white person is being displaced by a black person because of affirmative action is a very close cousin, if not the root of the dismantling of the Department of Education. And then it's layered on by our governor here, Glenn Youngkin, stumbled ass backwards into this concept of parental rights, which is total bullshit when he ran for governor 4 years ago. And parental rights was really, parents have to, there was a fear of actually teaching American history, and white parents didn't want their little Johnny and Janie to have any kind of a guilty conscience about slavery. And if you have an emotional issue with a factual historical reference, then that's a you issue. That's not a historical reference issue. Don't change history. Don't remove the textbooks. So when we talk about the dismantling of the Department of Education, it comes back to all of those things. We didn't want to make white people uncomfortable. The government, state governments, now the federal government wants white people to feel a lot less comfortable. And they want to instill and promote propaganda about the greatness of America. Look, America can be great and also can be rife with blood-soaked soil. Those two things are true at the same time. And to rewrite history or to expunge very elemental parts of the American story for the sake of, for whatever the purpose is akin to propaganda. So the dismantling of the Department of Education for me is insidious in its nature, and it comes back to an awful lot.
You talked about the need for a Jack and Jill, the D9, our figures of Uncle John, or affirmative action, or basically just a leg up. Like, open the door, crack the door for us. Those things are under threat right now, whether it's because of our own actions and liabilities, or whether it's because of federal funding maybe taken away. What do you think the future holds, or what do you think these organizations need to do to tighten up and have even longer longevity?
So I actually sat on the board of directors as the undergraduate international representative of Omega Psi Phi back in the mid 90s, back when we had 37 concurrent undergraduate law students pending, all hazing related. Didn't have the answer then, don't have the answer now, but I will say this. All nonprofit organizations are under immense scrutiny right now. There are rampant conspiracy theories about how these types of organizations are actually undercover, sort of political operatives or whatever it may be. So I would just say everybody needs to tighten up their protocols and make sure that what they're doing is on the up and up, because um, there's a case to be made that there's no such thing as paranoia right now. Like, uh, what is the old quote? Like, just because I think everybody's actually after me doesn't mean I'm paranoid. People can actually be after them. So I would just say, like, especially if you are a Black-centered organization, as AAV is, better be doing stuff. You better, have the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and keep your protocols in place, because any slip up can be used as an excuse to remove charters or actually, press charges. I mean, they're snatching people up off the streets these days.
That's how fucked we are.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked.
All right, Tab, we're moving on to the next segment, Game Film. The executive group chat, Signal executive group chat. Hey, this show is low-key perfect because we talked about, the dismantling and how everything is racism and how Black people really got to stay tight because they after us. But what about the people that keep failing and they keep getting the opportunity to
There's your
embarrass
affirmative action
all of
right
us?
there. I mean, there's your that's it's all completely intertwined. Like, these are idiots to like that is such a bush league move. That is. I mean, it's like a guy getting caught cheating by texting his wife a message to his girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is stupid. This is so. And these are folks, by the way, that are entrusted with, like, fucking nuclear secrets and the implements of state, and multi-million dollar, like $100 million F-20s or whatever it is, fighter jets and missile, all that kind of shit. And they're sending it on a group chat. By the way, the vice president of the United States is on that same fucking group chat. So along with the journalists that they didn't know, like, this can't be real life. And the fact that they're literally, sending those missile launch details in wave 1 and wave 2 and wave 3, and then the response from, like, God only knows which high-ranking government official is a series of emojis. Like, this is the Onion. This is a parody This is not real. This can't be real. And you ask how fucked we are? We're so fucked that headlines from The Onion are actually headlines on the Washington Post and the New York Times right now. You just can't make this shit up.
You can't make this shit up. Tam, one of my favorite things about you, and one of my favorite things that I love about learning from you, is some of the analogies that you use. What is Bush League? Is that what you
Right,
said?
Bush League. It's basically a reference to not ready for the show, minor league, lower level. So if you think about like all the different, so rookie leagues, A leagues, double A, triple A in baseball, all the way up to the major leagues, you're way down in the Bush leagues. Like you're not even close to prime time. You're not ready for what you're doing. You know what I mean? You couldn't probably manage a 7-Eleven and you're over there running the Department of Defense, for God's sake. Bush League.
Locker room talk, Tam. What is it that we can be doing as a community? And I'm talking about us, Black people. What can we be doing small that'll have a compound effect down the line? Like, what's something that you say we should be doing right now, non-negotiable?
There's a ton of possibilities. One of the things that we're thinking about is just small little neighborhood community improvements. It's kind of like I try and go to sleep and wake up in an area in an environment that's not going to produce a lot of overstimulation, right? So declutter, if you will, in your bedroom is not a bad idea, so that you go to sleep and wake up in a decluttered atmosphere. If you apply that to like a neighborhood, right? One thing that we can all do very readily is just, get some folks together and do a quick little, brush off the sidewalks and clean things up a little bit and maybe pull a couple weeds that are growing through the cracks of the concrete, that kind of thing. Look, I mean, we all behave differently when we put on a nice outfit. If I put on you put on a dress, you walk into a room a little bit differently, right? Nothing about you fundamentally has changed, but it has changed the way you the way you feel about this, the way you present. The same thing can be true about our front porch, where we live, how, what the environment is that's surrounding us. So little things like that can have a profound impact.
Oh, that's deep, but simple at the
Yeah,
same
you asked about
time.
small and simple. That's small and simple. Like you don't have to go ahead and climb that mountain right now. That you're not going to do all that right now. That's not small or simple. Small or simple things just like that can go along. And that's it for this week's Coach's Corner. I appreciate you all for tapping in.
Keep the conversation going. Drop your hot takes. Share this in your group chat. Argue in the comments. We see it all.
And remember, knowing the game ain't enough. You got to know how to win it.
We'll see you.